Welcome to the Yasmin Breakdown. Today we're going to talk about the racial incident at the BAFTAs. What happened? What is Tourette's? What was the slur? How did the celebrities react? How did regular people react? Let's get into it. Let me ask you something. If you were on stage at one of the most prestigious events in the world, doing your job, representing your craft, and someone in the audience shouted a racial slur at you, would you expect an apology? Of course you would. Now, what if that broadcaster had the power to make sure that millions at home never heard the slur and chose not to use it? What if the apology that was given on stage wasn't even directed at you? What if the man that could apologize still hasn't? This is not hypothetical. All of this happened at this year's BAFTAs award show. Let's get into it. The British Academy of Film and Television Arts, BAFTA, is one of the most celebrated award shows in the world. Think of it as Britain's Oscars. Prestige, glamour, legacy. This year, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo took the stage as presenters, two acclaimed Black men at the top of their craft. And from somewhere in that gilded audience, someone shouted a racial slur. A racial slur at the BAFTA Awards. The word cut through the room, and it didn't disappear because the BBC, which was broadcasting the ceremony, chose to keep it in. They had the ability to edit it out, and they didn't. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Variety, The Guardian, Deadline, The Root, TMZ, everybody was covering it. People couldn't believe what they heard and couldn't believe that the BBC had left it in. The celebrities had something to say, and so did everybody watching at home. Delroy Lindo, one of the men standing on stage that night, spoke about the incident. The weight in his words was unmistakable. Jamie Foxx reacted, a man who has spent his entire career navigating what it means to be a Black man in Hollywood, and he had seen enough. Wendell Pierce made his feelings known. Hannah Beckler, the first Black person to win an Academy Award in her category, she spoke out because she knows what it means when a stage like that is made unsafe. And journalist Jamel Hill spoke up in a way only she can. And there were everyday people, regular viewers who had heard that word come through their televisions on a Sunday night. They were offended, hurt, and exhausted because some of them have heard that word their whole lives, and they did not expect to hear it at a BAFTA broadcast. But there were also people in the comments attempting to explain it away, defending it, justifying it, and that divide tells its own story as well. Now, we have to address this because it has dominated the conversation. The person who shouted the slur has Tourette syndrome. Let's be clear about what that means. Tourette's is a neurological disorder characterized by repetitive, involuntary movements and vocalizations called tics. It is a recognized medical condition, not a choice, not a moral failing. A small percentage of people with Tourette's, roughly 10 to 15%, experience something called coprolalia, the involuntary utterance of obscene or socially inappropriate words. It is, by definition, uncontrolled. I acknowledge that fully. But here is where the conversation has to go further. The word that was shouted was not a generic profanity. It was a racial slur, a word with a long, violent, and dehumanizing history. And someone in the comments, not a celebrity, a person watching, asked a question, and I haven't been able to get it out of my head. And here's the question. If a person with Tourette's can shout out a racial slur, can they shout an apology? We'll come back to that. Actor Alan Cumming, who hosted the evening, came to the stage to address what had happened. He apologized, but not to Michael B. Jordan or Delroy Lindo, not to the two Black men who were standing at the podium when it happened. He apologized to the audience. And buried in that apology was a single word that changes everything. If anyone was offended. Let that sit. If anyone was offended by a racial slur, shouted at two black men in front of their peers at one of the most watched awards broadcasts of the season. Not, we know this caused harm. We are sorry, Michael. We are sorry, Delroy. No, not even a plain acknowledgement that something had occurred. Just if. Everyone in that room should have been offended. Everyone at home should have been offended. The word if does not belong in the sentence. It creates doubt where there should be none. It hedges where there must be clarity. And the two people who deserve to hear their names, who deserve someone to look them in the eye and say, I'm sorry this happened to you, were never addressed. That is not an apology. That is a liability statement dressed in empathy. Now let's talk about the BBC, because this is a part of the story that deserves more attention than it's getting. The BBC broadcast the ceremony. They had a production team, editing capability, a broadcast delay for situations just like this, and they chose not to use it. The slur went out over the airwaves into homes across the UK and to streaming audiences around the world, heard by millions, including children, including people for whom this word carries a lifetime of pain. The BBC eventually apologized. It was weak. The apology leaned into the Tourette's explanation, which is medically relevant to the person in the audience with Tourette's, but has absolutely nothing to do with the BBC's editorial decision. They are two completely separate issues, and the BBC blurred them together, deliberately or not, to avoid answering the real question. Why did you air it in the first place? They didn't say their editing protocols failed. They didn't say they owed it to their presenters to remove it. They didn't offer a single explanation as to why that word needed to reach a global audience. They blamed a medical condition and called it done. The BBC couldn't think enough of Michael B. Jordan, couldn't think enough of Delroy Lindo, could not think enough of their own black viewers to remove 12 seconds of tape. That is a choice, and it needs to be named one. The BAFTA Awards should be ashamed at how the night unfolded. The BBC should be ashamed of what they chose to broadcast and what they chose to say afterward. And the apology given on stage should have been given to the right people in the right language and without the word if. Now, John Davidson has Tourette syndrome. That is real. That deserves understanding. But remember that question from the comments? If a person with Tourette's can shout a racial slur, can they shout an apology? I know that's not how Tourette's works. Tics are involuntary. You can't command your nervous system to produce words on demand. But John Davidson can speak. He can sit down. He can look in a camera. He can pick up a phone, write a letter, or walk up to two men and say, I am sorry, what came out of my mouth was a slur. You did not deserve to hear that. I am sorry. He doesn't need Tourette syndrome to do that. He needs will. And until that happens, until Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo hear an apology directed at them by name, without the word if, without a medical condition being used as a shield, this story is not over. It's just waiting, and so are they. All right, y'all, let me know what you think. That was certainly one to grow on. Peace. See you next time.